Welcome to all of it. We got all of it.
All of it. All of it.
Our guest is Secretary Madeleine Albright, Bryan Cranston, Tank and the Bangas, Barry Jenkins, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Aaron Lee Carr, Esperanza Spalding, Gideon Glick, Helen Yoyemi, Fab Five Freddy, Benga Akanabe, Brene Brown, Tony Goldwyn, Tandy Newton, Jake Gyllenhaal. Welcome to all of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello.
What a pleasure.
Hi. This is so fun.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We're here every day, 12 to 2. Impromptu concert. I love it.
I love it.
I love it.
I was there for the love of it.
You must tell the truth.
I'm sure everyone's perspective is unique.
There's a lot of truth about the pain of being an immigrant, but they're jokes. We find the funny.
It's our strength.
At what point do you think women's health care will stop being a political issue?
When half of Congress can get pregnant.
Ran out of words, but we do what we do. We don't have no board, so we got to trade twos.
So we trade twos. I was this really dope groove. And Alison, was so nice to meet you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our August Get Lit with All of It book club event. We are very excited to be discussing this book, The Chosen and the Beautiful, with Nghi Vo. For those of you who join us regularly, welcome back. Book club members, for newcomers, we're so happy you're here as well. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Alison Stewart. I host an arts and culture program on WNYC, New York Public Radio, called All of It with Alison Stewart. That's handy since I'm the host. It's done daily, noon to 2, and we love books on the show. We love books on the show so much that we began a book club over a year ago, and we've had these tremendous authors join us monthly and join you on these live events. Now, our book clubs they're not exactly, the normal book club affair. Sometimes we have special guests, sometimes we have booze, sometimes we have music. We almost always have music. And tonight, in that vein, we are going to be enjoying some amazing jazz performances from Emmett Cohen. He's an amazing pianist. He'll have 2 performances, and we'll talk to Emmett about his work. And then make sure you stick around until the end, because that is when we announce our September book club choice. But now to the main event. Okay, everybody in the audience, we all read The Great Gatsby in high school. I'm guaranteed almost everybody who's watching tonight read The Great Gatsby. So think about the idea of someone deciding to take on The Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald's work, but put a completely different spin on it, to tell the story from someone else's point of view and perspective, that of Jordan Baker. That takes a lot of imagination. That takes a lot of chutzpah. That takes the woman of the evening, who is Nghi Vo. I want to read this review from Kirkus about The Chosen and the Beautiful because I think it's accurate. It says, Vo has crafted a retelling that in many ways surpasses the original. We have a partnership with the New York Public Library where all of our New York-based folks can take copies of the book out of the library. Get this number, 3,479 people checked out a copy of The Chosen and the Beautiful to read along with us. I wish you could see Nghi's face right now. Nghi, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited. I'm hoping that all 3,000 plus people are watching tonight, as well as many others who bought the book. So we hold the book club in between on Instagram. We do a lot of polls and we ask our readers questions. And we ask them, how many of them actually remember Jordan Baker from the original? 64% said they didn't remember much about her. So when you first started on this endeavor, how much did you remember about Jordan Baker? Or was she someone who was always sort of living with you and wanted to tell her story?
I think she made an impression on me from the very beginning due to this wonderful description of her, of a girl balancing teacups on her chin. And that there's that really beautiful, vivid piece of writing that Fitzgerald just throws out there like it's nothing. And it stuck with me. It struck with me the idea of a girl who is so very present for the terrible, terrible events of The Great Gatsby, and still manages to keep herself away from the disaster of it and remains untouched, but in a way that is just as vivid as Nick Carraway's. She's also there and she's also witnessing it. We just don't hear what she has to say about it. So that's where the idea for writing about Jordan came from.
Jordan is dimensional in this book. What is she dealing with when we meet her?
Everything. It's the idea of being in your very early 20s at the beginning of a summer where everything is possible. There's that sense of not only being at the beginning of a new era, which the 1920s were, but also the very real sense of being at the beginning of your own life. You know, it's that sort of very sublime wonder of looking out and not knowing how you're going to turn out or what you're going to be. On top of it, you throw in the uncertainty of being queer, of being Asian American, of being, the quote unquote, the only one, the only non-white person in a group of very white, very privileged people. And there's so many possibilities for her. And it's both the wonder of being able to choose and also the terror of realizing at some points she won't be able to choose, that her choices are made for her.
When did you know that that Jordan would be Vietnamese?
That's a funny question. She showed up that way for me when I started the idea of writing it. Like, I think I don't remember if I've talked with you before about why and how The Chosen the Beautiful came around to being written. Essentially, I was writing another novel. I'm about halfway through it. It's about a girl raised by ghosts. I'm still very excited about it, someday. But I was talking with my agent and she said, what else have you got going on? And I sort of just pitched her the idea of The Chosen the Beautiful. And as I spoke, I was sort of enlarging it as I go. I don't know what a story is about until I start talking about it and writing it. It's just this amorphous thing in my brain. And then I talk about it with other people and then suddenly I'm accountable, so I have to do it. And after I got to the end of that summary, my agent just stops me and says, Nghi, I'd like you to stop writing that other novel and write this one instead. And because I'm generally easygoing, I said, okay, sure. So, and then about 5 or 6 months later, maybe as little as 4, The Chosen the Beautiful was written.
So she was, this is how she came to you. This is how the character came to you.
Yeah, I just started talking about it and I'm like, man, that would be really cool. And that's, and that just sort of became the way she formed and stuck.
Did her backstory come to you in the same way, or was that something that you really felt you needed to craft to tell the story that you wanted to tell? This idea that she was quote unquote rescued during the midnight.
That was actually a lot of fun because I knew that because the world is the way it was, because we all travel, because we all leave home, because we're all kidnapped, maybe not all of us, I knew that there were Vietnamese people in the United States at that point. I knew that there was the missionary tradition, there was the violence of orphans taken from their homeland and removed via what people would consider very godly, very religious, for very religious reasons. And so it was sort of a backtrack. I knew that Jordan was there. I had to figure out how she got there. And the route of being a Vietnamese American adoptee was one route. Another route that I briefly explored for her was the idea of the French steamships, actually, which brought a lot of both Vietnamese workers and Vietnamese tourists over. So I had a few choices to make. And the more I got to know Jordan, the more I sat with the idea of her being, in so many ways, despite her privilege, despite her beauty, her grace, her wit, she is a very displaced person. She is a person who is lost. She's far away from home, whatever home looks like, and she has no idea. So consider that doubly lost. And on top of that, it's the wonder of both discovering that horrible fact and discovering what the future might hold for her.
The woman who loves her so much to come and bring her back to live with her dies, and she's raised by people who don't really have that much warmth or care for her. Mm-hmm. How do we see this play out in her relationships going forward?
It comes out in the distance she has for the whole world. And I really believe that the idea of a certain amount of distance can make you an excellent observer at the same time as it makes you sometimes a bystander in your own life. And that's so hurtful. You know, the idea that this is your life and you're watching it, and there's an idea that it might have come from a sense of being helpless, of, just having to watch things go by without being able to affect them. But there's also the strange, bizarre, and sometimes unwanted gift of being able to see all the corners that other people who are more active in their lives, who are much more a part of things and very much more seated in themselves as people, they don't have that ability. They can't see why they're doing things. But if you sit back and you have to sit back and watch people, eventually you do realize why they're doing the terrible, terrible, stupid things they're doing.
And for everyone watching, we want to let you know that we'll be getting to your questions as well. You can leave them in the chat, or you can go to us at Instagram at all of it WNYC on our Insta stories. We have a question up for you right there where you can type your question in for Nghi. We'll get to those in just a little bit. It's so interesting to have Jordan present in certain parts of a story we all know where she wasn't present. Even some of the most pivotal moments of Gatsby and Daisy being reunited. Specifically in that scene, what does her presence, how does it change the story? How does it help inform the story you wanted to tell?
That scene is so very so very much a pivot, there we go, of the Great Gatsby. It is such an important scene where, you know, it's two lovers meeting again after a long time. It's also the scene very much where Nick sort of locks in what he knows about these two people, both Gatsby's frustration and Daisy's wonder and acceptance. And if that was going to be so very important to the Great Gatsby, it needed to be important to Jordan and to the Chosen and the Beautiful as well. Not only do I need Nick watching that scene, I need Jordan watching Nick watch that scene. And it is such a sad scene in the original book in the first place. Nick literally does just wander out of his own house as people are having these big dramatic moments. And I'm like, maybe there should just be somewhere there for Nick, and maybe we should have that scene where, you know, this is heartbreaking if he's as into Gatsby as I and a lot of other people seem to believe he is.
Let's talk a little bit about the magic. Was the magic part of that original conversation with your agent where you were just sort of free-flowing, kind of just free range, thinking about this idea of this book? Was magic always a part of it?
Yes, among other things, I'm a fantasy writer. I'm a fantasist. I have, you know, delusions of writing great American novels and whatnot, but at the end of the day, I'm not really happy unless I've set something on fire with a dragon. I mean, congratulations, Nick's not a dragon for this one. I feel good that I restrained myself from that, you know? Yeah, no, the magic was so very much a part of it from the beginning, not only because I thought it would make for a stronger story, but also because I'm a fantasy writer, but also because there is this really magical sense to the 1920s, especially as we look back to it. The 1920s, everything was changing. They were coming out of their own pandemic. They were just finishing off with the end of a world war that, you know, was meant to be so big, nothing that big would ever happen again, which they were wrong. But the 1920s were, the best analogy for it is electricity. Suddenly power is everywhere, and power is both available and accessible, and so is luxury in the form of advertisements. You didn't know how the other half lived as well before then, but suddenly you have pictures and you have the ability to buy things and buy things on credit, which once again has a consequence. So to me, the 1920s, both at the time for the people experiencing it and also for us looking back at a time of largesse and profit and wonder and luxury, there's magic just woven through that. And it wasn't a huge jump to make the leap to Deals with the Devil and the idea that you could dance all night under a moon that never moves.
I do want to ask you about the demoniac. Am I saying it right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I don't drink very much. I thought, is this real? and then I thought, oh, is this some sort of like absinthe spin-off? But no, obviously it's a magic potion. When you thought about that particular bit of magic, how did you arrive on something, an elixir that people would take?
Well, the first thing to remember is that I'm very bad at alcohol myself. I am incredibly bad at drinking it. I'm bad at appreciating it. But on the other hand, I also live in the United States. And more than that, I live in Wisconsin, which is a very hard drinking state. So I think a lot about alcohol. And I grew up thinking a lot about alcohol. And there was the idea, before I ever had any, where I had an idea of what it must be. It must be magical. It must be adulthood. It must be a key to another world that is way more interesting than the one I'm living in, because, you know, I was having these thoughts when I was 14 and 15. So demoniac is all of those dreams made flesh. And then you throw in the idea that it literally comes from demons. What do demons want you drinking? And the answer is something that you think is good and is probably not amazing for you, that will probably lead you to all sorts of interesting, terrible paths. And things can be wonderful and they can be terrible. And if there's any guidance for how I was writing demoniac. Wonderful and terrible are probably the words that I was trying to steer between.
What about Jordan's special skill, her special magic, this paper magic, his ability to create beings out of paper?
This is going to be ridiculous, but that one was, that did not come up necessarily in the first conversation I had with my agent about that. I started writing the first scene in The Chosen and the Beautiful. It turns out to be something like maybe the fourth or fifth scene, but it was a very young Jordan cutting up a paper lion, and suddenly it becomes real. And that was it. That's all I needed. It was, oh, that's what she does. That's what she's good at. That's what she is talented at. And it stands in as both a marker of the power that she doesn't quite know how to harness herself. It is connection to her homeland and to other people who do what she does professionally and have a lot of culture and taboos and rules about it. And what Jordan has is raw talent and the ability to realize that she can mess things up. And sometimes she really likes messing things up.
We asked our readers on Instagram what their favorite piece of magic was from The Chosen and the Beautiful. And one reader answered, giving the all-seeing eye billboard a voice. Of course, is a reference to Dr. G.J. Eichelberg from the book. What went into that decision?
That has always struck with me as being one of the most beautifully cinematic parts of the book. The idea of these two huge eyes looking down over the world. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, does that actually make a decent advertisement? I'm not genuinely sure it does. It's just kind of grotesque and horrifying. And so it was, if we have eyes, we have witness. And that's actually one of the sticking points of the scene with Gatsby and Daisy, is the idea that a crime has been committed and no one has seen. And that's not true. Throughout history, things happen and people do see. It's just, who do we listen to? So there's the idea of peoples whose voices are worth less, people whose voices are silenced. And looking back, that's very much a symbol for it, the idea that the silenced can be made to speak.
Everybody who's watching, some of the questions are starting to roll in. We'll get to your questions in just a little bit. You can put them in the chat, or you can send us to us via Instagram at allofit WNYC. Just click on the stories. We have to talk about Gatsby for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when we all read The Great Gatsby, it was the metaphor that he sold his soul to the devil. In this one, he does. He actually makes a deal with hell. Was that it? I feel like I'm asking this question a lot, but I'm so interested. Was that in the original pitch, or did that come later?
No, I think we just knew it all happened. Like that, I didn't even have to say that one. The wonderful thing about having Diana Fox as my agent is the fact that we think very much alike, and it was just understood. Jay Gatsby has sold his soul. He sold his soul in the original novel. He sells his soul much more obviously in The Chosen and the Beautiful, but the more I wrote it, the more I realized that I don't think that necessarily makes him special. We all do that. I think we all have these moments where, you can continue as you are, or you can take the chance and change everything. And what are you willing to give up? And what are you willing to offer up in exchange for just for the chance of things being different? And I think with that in mind, it's just that Gatsby goes a little further than the rest of us, and he doesn't flinch from it, and he doesn't try to pretend it's something besides what it is. Except, of course, he does when Daisy is concerned, it's just splendid, the idea of these illusions that he loves and that he makes real. There's the part of it is Jordan's paper magic, which, it is magic and it is power, but it's paper. It's, it can be torn up. It can be, if you wet it, you leave it outside, it rots. Gatsby is illusion made real. And Jordan is trying to figure out how she feels about all that.
I started the book and I read a good amount of it, and then I stopped and I restarted the book because I found myself thinking about the original. And then I thought to myself, I just want to read this book. I would like to just read this book. For you as a writer, did you go back to the original text? Did you ever have to stop yourself from going back to the original text? I'm curious what your relationship with the original text was.
Oh, I love The Great Gatsby. I don't think I could have written this book if I didn't love it so much. So when I realized that I was going to be writing, the book that became The Chosen and the Beautiful, I went back and I reread The Great Gatsby. And the first thing I did was I started underlining everything I didn't understand, which actually at a remove of more than 100, at about 100 years, that's a lot. I realized I did not know what a hydroplane was, where Gatsby asked Nick if he wants to come up in the hydroplane. And there was a lot of research I had to do to figure out it's probably a plane that can land on water. I had to stop myself from making that into a dragon too. That was deeply tempting. And part of it was just the idea of doing the research and making sure I knew what the book was doing. I mean, The Great Gatsby is only about 40,000 words long. I double that account in The Chosen and the Beautiful. And the thing is, just because it's a short book does not mean it's not so incredibly dense. And there's so much going on and it's wonderful. So many times it felt like just taking a crowbar to the original text and opening up to see what I could fit in there, but also what Fitzgerald himself had put in.
We asked our readers whether Jordan was really in love with Nick. 56% said yes, 44% said no. What draws these two together? And then I'm going to add, is Nick really in love with Gatsby?
The thing that draws these two together is the idea of being people who are both, whether by nature or by design, they're observers. They're people who have had to take a step back and spend a lot of time observing without necessarily thinking that they may be observed themselves. They're drawn together because, my friends group is like this. Queer people tend to find each other. And I believe that they're, at least in The Chosen and the Beautiful, both very queer. And the question of whether or not Nick loves Gatsby, absolutely. But Nick loves a lot of people. And honestly, so does Jordan.
We learn a lot about Jordan and Daisy's friendship. And it seems that friendship was really solidified when Jordan helps Daisy secure an abortion. But later on, towards the end of the novel, there's this description of Daisy and Jordan, and she writes, "Don't get too close to Daisy Faye," a voice told me. "Only disaster, my girl. Didn't I know that already?" Are they frenemies? Are they friends? Truly friends?
When I was writing the Jordan and Daisy relationship, it really was channeling those really intense relationships that girls tend to have with other girls around about between the ages of, say, 13 and 21. That's such a fraught age. And those girls are your allies, and they are, in some ways, they're very much your countrymen in a country that you can only stay in for so very long. And everything is so intense, and your emotions are so intense. And so much of it is really love trying to come out and trying to fight against society and the world and your expectations. So it's very much love that Daisy and Jordan have together. But the big question that I think The Chosen and the Beautiful asks is, just because it's love, is that enough of an excuse? And no, it isn't. It's not an excuse for Daisy, even if she loves someone, to love them so terribly. And for Jordan, I think it's never stated because we are deeply in Jordan's head. And there is so much that Jordan just does not care to talk about. I have reams of world building that Jordan does not give a damn about. It's been great. It's, I can write as much as I want, and Jordan does not care to look at it. And I'm like, fine, I guess we're just moving on to the party then. But she's deeply in love with Daisy as well. She's in love with what Daisy represents. She's in love with the person that you have helped them so much, that you've put so much of yourself in them. It's like loving yourself in some ways. So yes, it's very much love, but the question is always, is this love worth it? Is this love good for anyone? And mostly the answer is no.
We have many audience questions for you, Nghi.
Oh, okay.
Let's start with, this is from Anonymous. Hello, Anonymous.
Hi.
Was there really a debauched bar like the Sildrillion that existed in that era?
I think that's one that you need to go to the history books for. The answer is, there was at times, there were a lot of bars that actually had what we would consider queer nights, basically, especially as you got into Harlem, especially as you got to more racialized neighborhoods as well. you definitely had those parties. If you had, I don't know if you had anything as concrete as the Cendrillon was, because we don't actually have the benefit of, you know, magical protections, but there were definitely knights like the Cendrillon, if not actual full establishments.
This is from Apples One.
Hi, Apples.
We don't learn much about how Jordan became a professional golfer or what that part of her life means to her. Why not?
Okay, this is another thing that Jordan did not care about, and I'm so sorry, because I actually did the research into the idea of the Women's Professional Golf League for the 1920s, and it was actually really interesting. There were a few female golfers that Jordan Baker from The Great Gatsby is based on, among them one of Fitzgerald's exes, I believe. Women were not allowed to golf professionally in an officially recognized way. And at that point, they hadn't quite created their own league yet, but they were having competitions. And this was still of great interest to New York's upper class set. So Jordan is famous in a way. She is not famous officially. And the more I wrote about Jordan, the more that this thing that does make her exceptional is not something that she cares very much about. It's something that people bring up. For her, I think it's something that she talks about at parties, and it's something that she is good at, but she's good at it in a very careless way that she wouldn't mind putting down if she felt she needed to.
From Anonymous, I love the idea that both Nick and Gatsby are of mixed race heritage. To me, it gives your novel so much more depth than the original. What was your intention in doing so?
It was the idea, it started with the idea of presentation, actually. Nick is, as far as the world is concerned, white. Gatsby is white passing, although the question comes up more often for him. It was the idea of presentation and who you are on the outside and who the world lets you be and who the world doesn't let you be and who you have to keep to yourself and who you're allowed to talk about that with. There is a legacy for both of them that is both very questionable in Gatsby's mind, who has thought about it more. It's something that he considers something that needs to be hidden. And the question of whether it really does need to be hidden, that is a conclusion that it's something that he has to fight with. It's something that Jordan doesn't get to fight with because her heritage is written on her face. She doesn't get to hide. And there's that tension between those two polar points of view that I feel really does kind of help with the underpinning for the entire novel. I think that's an answer.
That's an answer. This is also just a comment from Kate. Oh. Hi, Miss Nghi Vo. Congratulations on your wonderful book, a beautiful achievement. I'm so happy for you.
Oh, thanks.
We have a lot of people incredibly interested in the paper magic. So I'm going to read the first one, and then the last one is a bit of a spoiler, but I think if you're watching this, you already know this. Okay. Shakespeare's Ghost writes, I have to say Daisy killing the paper daisy was a dark but interesting moment in the book. Did you consider a plot thread of having paper daisy marry Tom?
Now I wish I had. No, one of the reasons why paper daisy was made is because I wanted to explore what Daisy is willing to do and what Daisy considers murder, because then we go from there, we jump right into what she did to Myrtle. I really love the idea of that very sweet paper Daisy getting to go off and live her life, but of course she doesn't. She is a sacrifice to Daisy as she is. There's something metaphoric there. There's something kind of spiritually realized there. But there's also the fact that I wanted to answer the question, would Daisy Fay beat someone to death with a shovel? And the answer is, oh yeah, she would.
You're very certain about that.
Oh yeah. I put money on it, yeah.
So this is a little bit of the spoiler question. Mm-hmm. I think as I said, anybody's watching this knows. If not, you can just hold off for a second. This is from Betsy. Could you talk about Nick being a paper soldier at the end of the book?
I certainly can. Okay, so this book came into being with that being my understanding of Nick. And that actually goes back to The Great Gatsby itself, actually, because I think on page 1 or 2, Nick talks about the fact that one of his grandfathers or his great-grandfathers sent someone to fight in his place during the Civil War. And that struck me as such a strange detail to just drop. I mean, it brings up so many details about what the book itself is about: legitimacy, seeming, honor, who takes the terrible things that happen in your life, who's that sacrifice. And so the idea struck me that, of course, my Nick is that sacrifice. He doesn't know he is. There's so many things that Nick doesn't know. It's like you can fill a book with the things that Nick Carraway does not know in The Chosen and the Beautiful. And I always had the idea that he was the sacrifice to some family's love for their own child. And that sacrifice went very weirdly. And that's why Nick is not allowed back to Minnesota. That's why this Nick that has been basically cut out and made to go to war is now sort of, partying his way up and down the East Coast. And with that in mind, I think that makes him both more sympathetic. I mean, Jordan remarks on herself, the idea of, and would I have liked the original Nick as much? And she says, no, I do not think I would have. And I think it makes him humble, and I think it makes him fragile, which is interesting to me. And I think it makes him brave and much less inclined to think about who or what he might have to be.
And our final question from our audience. This is, since we talked about Daisy beating people to death.
Sure, I'm in.
Also readers, whether they thought Daisy was a villain in this book. And it was almost split. 52% said yes, 48% said no. So when you were reading The Great Gatsby and rereading it, the question asks, did you find Daisy to be a real villain of the story, or is she the villain of your story?
I think Daisy is difficult. I think Daisy is dangerous. I think that Daisy is human, actually. And when I went back and reread The Great Gatsby in preparation for writing The Chosen and the Beautiful, that struck me way harder at the age of 40 than it does at the age of 14 or 15 when I first read the book. The sticking point for me was the twilight sleep. Which is mentioned in The Great Gatsby, and I just opened up in The Chosen and the Beautiful the idea of what the twilight sleep was, how, rich women, in order to basically experience a painless childbirth, did something called the twilight sleep, where scopolamine was used to knock them out. And basically the advertisement was, go to sleep, wake up with a baby in your arms. It doesn't actually stop pain. It just stops you from remembering the pain. And, given what we know about human memory, there's nothing we don't remember. There's nothing our bodies don't remember. So the idea that Daisy is someone who underwent this procedure and didn't start to remember it until she started having terrible nightmares about being in dark places where she's tied down with all the pain that goes with delivering a baby. And that sort of made Daisy what she was. She is both a victim and she is also a predator. And if you don't think that Daisy is dangerous, you should maybe rethink that idea. I don't know if she's a villain, but she may not be any good for anyone who gets too close to her.
The last line of The Great Gatsby reads, so we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. In your version, Jordan's final line is, under the rack and wreck of what had come before, the sky was new, and I reached for it with a yearning, eager hand. What were you thinking about when you were writing the last line?
The fact that my agent had told me, whatever last line you use, it has to be at least as good as the one from The Great Gatsby. I'm like, gee, no pressure, that's fine. No, what I was thinking, what I knew it had to be was that idea is, in The Great Gatsby, that line is about looking into the past. I needed Jordan looking into the future because there was no point in writing this whole thing if Jordan doesn't have a future. She is moving forward. She is a 20th century woman. She's a 20s girl. She is like nothing that has come before. And she doesn't like to admit it because Jordan would really like her whole shtick to be having a good time and very little else. But she is the first of so many women who are going to be finding their way in that era, in a straight line, basically from her time to ours. And I needed her to have a future. that was, if there was nothing else I managed to get right, and I'm still on the fence over whether I did or not, that's what needed to happen. It definitely needed to be a line about the future and heading forward as fast and as with as much joy and exhilaration as possible.
Nghi Vo, thank you so much for spending so much time with us and for agreeing to be our August Get Lit with All of It Book Club author. The Chosen the Beautiful was a wonderful read. So many of our listeners really enjoyed it. They let us know, and we really appreciate all your time and your work.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
So when we were thinking about a musical guest for tonight, it seemed pretty clear we were going to go with jazz, right? 1920s theme. And Fitzgerald wrote the book that is, the title is The Jazz Age After All. And to make sure we got the guest just right, we visited with WNYC's very own songbook expert, Paul Cavalcante. His first choice, someone he called, let me read this exactly right, the young lion leader of jazz in New York, Emmett Cohen. In addition to performing at festivals and clubs all over, like the Village Vanguard, Cohen is the winner of a fellowship named for Cole Porter. His latest album, Future Stride, takes a modern approach to 20s era swing styles. So let's all get transported back in time to the jazz age with his rendition of the classic, Tea for Two. Here's Emmett Cohen. Emmett Cohen, welcome to All of It.
Hey, how you doing? So nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
You were such a perfect guest, and the music has just gotten us all in the mood. The whole month that we've been playing the promo on the radio, everybody loves it so much. It just, everybody was like, this sound, it's modern, but it's also classic. When you first started playing jazz, how did you think about how you wanted to play jazz?
I think that's like saying when you're a kid, how do you think about living in the world? Well, all you really know is your influences, and at that point they're your parents. And you know, in this music, there's a very rich historical legacy, and I stand on the shoulders of my musical forefathers, grandfathers, parents. Even I've had a lot of apprenticeships with some of the older masters, but people like Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, Fats Waller, Louis Armstrong. Those are who I consider to be my musical grandparents. So what I did at the beginning was try to sound like them and imitate what it is they played. And that's how the continuum of this oral tradition really works.
We just heard,
at least for me.
We just heard Tea for Two, which came out a year before The Great Gatsby. Why did you choose that for tonight?
Well, I thought there was a big parallel between that and the Roaring Twenties. I guess what I'm trying to say is we're in the Roaring Twenties again, and she Nghi kind of mentioned a lot of the parallels, but they just came out of a pandemic, and everything was set to prosper. And I've been feeling that a lot lately, and really feeling that. That the music, especially where I live in Harlem, is set to come alive in this very special way. And Harlem played a big part of it then, and it played a big part of it now. For instance, we have been doing and continue to do a live stream from my apartment. It's called Live from Emmett's Place, and what it is a modern day Harlem rent party. And so we're actually doing the same thing that my heroes Fats Waller and Art Tatum and James P. Johnson, Willie the Lion Smith, and these Harlem legends, piano players, did in their homes. And we're doing that in a modern context right here in Harlem, just virtual for everyone in the world who is interested to come and take a front row seat here.
They're so much fun to watch, and you have committed to, there's about 68 of them. I mean, you really committed to doing these live streams during the pandemic. I know what we as viewers got from it. What did you get from it?
I think it was very symbiotic. The pandemic started, and we said, like, all our gigs are canceled, all our performances, we need to play. It's how we express ourselves. It's how we emote. It's how we communicate. It's something I think that runs very deeply. Like any artist will tell you they need to do that thing. And so with that taken away, we said, how can we pivot and how can we make something where we get to play, and that also promotes some kind of sense of community, which I think is the biggest thing that I realized that jazz has to offer. It's this community. It's so seated in the tradition. You can bond with someone over the music of the 20s, 30s, 40s, bebop, Miles Davis, John Coltrane. But you can also go out to the club in Harlem on Smoke Jazz Club on 106th Street and sit at the bar and just talk about anything to someone. And it's always created this sense of community, whether just in the clubs or through the rich history and knowledge of the music.
I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of a musical lesson. The name of your album is Future Stride. What's stride music?
Stride piano is what you heard a little bit in Tea for Two. It's when they peeled back all the layers of the big band, and all of a sudden the depression hit, another depression, and they couldn't pay a whole band worth of people to come. So what they did, the pianists, were they figured out a way to imitate the entire band. So you had the bass down low, and you had the chords in the middle register, and then you had the melody up top. And you can hear that a lot in marches and orchestral stuff, but really the piano is covering the range of the orchestra. And I think I heard Herbie Hancock give an interview once backstage at the Kennedy Center, and they asked him, what does the piano mean to you? And he said, well, the piano is a family of black and white members, 88 to be exact, and they all work together under my fingertips to create a great orchestra. And that to me really, really, really meant the world kind of what the piano is about. And incorporated that in my stride playing and also in my solo piano playing, and I wanted to create a big orchestra. And so stride is traditionally the pa, and stride is traditionally also thought of as an older thing. And for me, I wanted to bring that older thing alive and make it relevant in this time period, because so many people discard it as old, but really it's this beautiful tool that can make people feel things just like it did back then, 100 years later now.
You know, we've had several very interesting jazz musicians on our radio show, and we've talked about the term jazz and how some younger musicians don't necessarily like the term, or they want to sort of reframe it. You know, Vijay Iyer told us he calls it creative music, whereas Christian Scott-Otunde Aduja calls it stretch music. How do you think about the word jazz?
Well, I have a friend and a mentor named Nicholas Payton, and he started a movement, or continued a movement that was Max Roach's movement. Max Roach, something he said was jazz is a 4-letter word, and that this is really Black American music, and that is 100% the case. It was born from the struggle of African Americans, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. And I think my job is just to be conscious of that and to educate about that however I can, and know that you know, just because you play European classical music doesn't mean you have to be European white. But I think for this music, it's very special, and it's very deep connection to the soul of the church, and all of the music that came from that, everything from Stevie Wonder to Michael Jackson to Prince to Biggie Smalls, you know, the whole tradition, to Common, who does a lot of stuff with jazz, and you know, I think my job is to create the music, and it can be called many different things, but for me, it's about the heart, and it's about the spirit and the connection to the history.
Is there a certain type of jazz that just really speaks to you, not as a musician necessarily, but as a listener when you hear someone else play this particular style?
There's a few things. You know, a wonderful vocalist, someone like Sarah Vaughan or Billie Holiday, you can often hear the struggle in the lyrics, and you can hear the joy, and you know, someone like Louis Armstrong singing or playing, you hear the joy that comes out of the hope. When Louis Armstrong goes up for that high note at the end of the tune, that is the joy, that is the hope. You know, no matter what we've been through, everything's going to be okay. You know, things will be okay, things will get better. And I think for a lot of what the music represents, that's the message that I'm most concerned with, leaving people with that hope, because there's so much darkness in the world. And if I can even brighten one person's day at a concert, then I feel like I've done something to make the world a little bit of a better place. So there's that. There's also bebop. We just celebrated Charlie Parker's 101st birthday a couple of days ago. And the language of Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, it's this intellectual way of dealing with the same 12 notes through this intense rhythmic and harmonic structure that I heard at a young age, and I said, I want to figure that out. I want to speak that language, and have tried to surround myself with the masters that are still here that can pass that on to me, and listening to the records and doing everything I can to understand it from the core.
This is exciting and hopeful. You're playing live again.
Yes, I've been pretty fortunate to find some of the loopholes. We've been to Europe a couple of times, and Europe, aside from Europe, we went to Russia, and been traveling a bit around. I'm going to Vail, Colorado tomorrow to play, and I think the venues and the organizations are figuring out ways creative ways to put musicians in front of people so that they can express themselves and the people can take in their music. And there's been a bunch of heartwarming times when we've traveled somewhere and someone said, you know, I haven't heard live music in 18 months. And just that moment right there, it made me cry. It made me feel this certain thing. And for me, that's everything. Those moments of change and pivot in somebody's, heart.
All right, we're going to go out an original song of yours called Harlem Blues. You've done a performance for us. Set it up for us, would you?
Sure. it was a funny thing that happened where they asked me for the show to send some stuff in, and it turns out I did this Fats Waller medley, something I like to do that really like represents Harlem. And they were like, "Oh, actually, we don't have the rights to this." And I was running from thing to thing, and I said, "You know what? This is a perfect opportunity to improvise something on the spot, because this is what the music is about. It's about that flexibility, which we've seen a lot of this year, and it's about the blues." And I think that's something that I always try to remember, that the blues is just music from the heart. It's music that connects the heart and the brain, but it's just that connection to humanity, whatever it may be. And this is my take on my connection to humanity in Harlem the other morning, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Emmett Cohen, thank you so much for making time for us and for the fantastic performances.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Here's Harlem Blues. Thanks so much to Emmett Cohen for those amazing performances, and of course to Nghi Vo for being our Get Lit with all of it book club author this month, The Chosen, the Beautiful. Just a fantastic book. Tomorrow, September, we are moving on to our next book. It's right here. I'm not showing it to you yet because we have some thank yous to do. We need to thank our partners at the New York Public Library. They get these books into New Yorkers' e-readers. That, of course, is Andrew Medlar, Tony Marks, and Brian Bannon. Also want to thank the folks at the Green Space who make this beautiful video happen each and every month. That's Jennifer Ricardo, David Utsky, and Emma. And finally, to the producers of Get Lit, special crew, Megan Ryan, Jordan Loff, and Simon Close. They make it happen each and every month. Okay, time for the big reveal. Our September book is a novel that tells the story of a man without whom our partners at the New York Public Library wouldn't exist. Same for the people at the Met, the Museum of Natural History, and Central Park. The man is named Andrew Haswell Green. He was a self-made man who rose to prominence and power in the 19th century in New York City, and he was murdered in broad daylight. A secret, all life, excuse me, but when Green is murdered in 1903, a secret he kept all his life will finally emerge. The book is called, excuse me, The Great Mistake by Jonathan Lee. In a starred review, Kirkus called the novel a highly satisfying mix of mystery and character portrait. New Yorkers, you can head to wnyc.org/getlit to check out an e-copy of the novel. You should follow us on Instagram at allofitwnyc to keep up with book club announcements and our discussion questions. And then mark your calendars for September 21st at 7 p.m. That's when author Jonathan Lee and a special musical guest will be with us to discuss the novel. So until then, happy reading. Keep checking out All of It WNYC on Instagram, and we'll meet you back here on September 21st. Thanks for watching.